Welcome back to another episode of I'm Really Into That Stuff. This is the podcast that features me, Jana Stern, psychic activator, energy healer, and astrologer, as I delve into deep conversations with different folks in the holistic and conscious industries about the many beliefs and practices of spirituality, mental health, and what it means to be a human who's into that stuff in the 2020s and beyond. I'm Really Into That Stuff is excited to tell you that we have won one of the top 10 Esoterica podcast spots on feedspot.com. Check out the whole list at blog.feedspot.com/esoterica_podcasts for the whole list. Thanks to our friends at Feedspot for this incredible honor. Welcome back to another episode of I'm Really Into That Stuff. I'm your host, Jana Stern, and I am joined by one of my favorite humans. Oh, I'm so excited that you're here. Lynz Pallister, you are here by literally divine calling. You were told to arrive on this podcast, which I love, by my dear friend and your sister who has been on this podcast, and we lost her about a year ago now, Crystal. You guys can go and check out that beautiful episode. She talked a lot about the cancer that she was suffering through and just her beautiful perspective on things. Lynz, you are also living for a living, just as your sister was. You are a DJ and an inner explorer, which I love. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into all of that stuff.
Long journey, man. Like, I would say I remember very distinctly. So I moved to Edmonton when I was 20, super randomly. And I went to this bookstore. And in this bookstore, I was like getting rid of some books. And they're like, you can take like $10 or we can give you like a $25 credit in the store. And in that store, I found my first astrology book that started breaking down astrology.
Do you remember the name of it?
No, I don't. I wish I did. It was almost like an 8x10. Like, it was a big book. And if you have it, I'm going to die.
I might.
You might?
Is it this book?
No, it's not that book.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Nice. But like that, honestly, I took that book home and I looked at my birth date and whatever. And I remember reading it and I felt this huge sigh of relief. And I'm like, I'm not an asshole. Like, it was this, honestly, because I always felt so different from everybody. I always felt like I couldn't ever fit into a group. I had a lot of identity issues. I had a lot of like sexuality, like not issues, but I was just so different. And I moved differently through the world. And everyone commented on it a lot. Like, oh, Lynz is a lone wolf. She's this, she's that. And at that time in my life, I just needed something that could help me. Like, I tried a couple of years earlier to like, I remember picking up a book on Scientology and starting to read it and being like, no, that's not for me. Like, I went to a church thing with my friend and I was the only, they're like, I remember the pastor at the front, he's like, if at this point you're uncomfortable and you want to leave, you can leave. And I stood up and I laughed. And I was like, yeah, this is not for me. So yeah, astrology was the first thing for me that really spoke to me, that made me feel like seen.
It is that magic, isn't it? It's like, yeah, you were just designed this way. It's okay. And you're different because we're all different. And here's why and how.
Yeah, it just did. It just made me feel more settled in myself. It didn't fix anything. I still had to do all that work. It wasn't like a magic trick by any means, but it definitely gave me some solace in knowing that this is literally written in the stars. Like, this is an energy that you can learn to read and understand. And then I started taking astrology courses, like just some really basic ones, to the point where I was able to like sometimes guess people's signs. I was dating this guy at one time and I was really into it at that point. And I remember his dad came. We were sitting in this bar and then his dad came in, the first time I ever met him, and looked at his dad and I was like, hey. His dad walks away. He's like, what sign is my dad? And I'm like, an Aries. And he was like, oh, how did you know that? And I'm like, I could just tell by his energy and his facial features. He's like, oh, sure. And I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm right. Sometimes I'm really not.
Right. And I always say, like, if I'm wrong, it's because we have a whole chart.
You have a really strong meaning.
Exactly. I love that. I love that astrology, started you on the path of just kind of knowing yourself and connecting deeper with yourself. And I know that you and your sister really, really had that in common.
Yeah, absolutely. We were constantly, she was always sending me stuff and we were always talking about it. I got her a gift. When I got into astrology, I found Astrology. I was the first one to find that site. I shared it with her. Actually, a few weeks before she passed, she actually said that she said, Lindsay, Astrology is still my oldest password on the internet. Like I've never changed it. So we've both been using that site for 20 years. But when I got into the site, I bought her and my younger sister at the time and my girlfriend at the time, I bought them all their psychological horoscopes. I don't know if you've ever seen that on there, but carried that with me. I have referenced that every time I read it. I feel like I'm reading a new story because there's so much of things that have evolved within me. And even her, I had 2 copies of it. And I remember again, like a month before she passed, 2 months before, she's like, Lynz, do you have that extra copy? She's like, I'd like to reference my astrology, So it was just this constant in both of our lives that we use as guidance, and I still am constantly looking at it and when I need it, to just give some to what's going on, to what I need to understand about myself or where I'm at. And sometimes I read it and I'm like, yeah, check. I feel like I've moved through that or I've got a better grasp on that and evolved something. Yeah.
It's like I often refer to it as the map of your soul, right? And so you, throughout time, no matter what it is that you need karmically to work through, you're going to keep looking back down at that map and being like, am I on the right path? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Okay. Got it. And then you can just move forward. But it's a great tool to use to really know yourself because there's a lot that can happen in a lifetime. And it's nice to have a place to just know, okay, I'm not lost. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Here's where I am. Time, space, the whole circle. I'm here.
Yeah.
In the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I think it also gives clues, right? To things that I sometimes don't always see in myself because of my own insecurities I'll stop with insecurities because that's usually where it lies.
Or like limitations, right?
Yeah, limiting beliefs, right? About myself. Oh, I'm not capable of doing that. It's not possible for me to do that because I see myself. So my inner critic or whatever is maybe stronger that day than on a more, balanced or positive day. So sometimes astrology can give you confidence too into understanding that there's more to this life and this pattern than sometimes our limiting beliefs will allow us to go.
And there are astrologers who can absolutely foretell what is to come. I mean, the old adage that millionaires don't have astrologers, billionaires do. It's because there is stuff to know that when this planet is going to ingress into that sign, it's going to mean something. When this starts to square that, it's going to do something. And it's not an exact science, but it's not an exact science.
Yeah. It's the energy, right? Literally the language of energy. And the more that you accept that we're energy and that we're energetic beings, I have no idea who's talking right now, but it's me.
Sounds like your sister.
It does, yeah. But I believe it. And the more that we accept that, the more that we're in flow with it. I find like this week I had a really hard week, like I was just mentally fatigued, physically fatigued. I had a lot of just flare ups going on in my body and stuff. And, old Lindsay from 5 years ago would have let the negative thoughts and stuff just like keep compiling, keep beating me up, keep whatever. But because of this perspective of like, this too shall pass, like energy's going to flow. It's not always going to be this like positive rainbow train all the time.
Or negative misery all the time. It's not going to be either of those forever.
If you believe that, if you believe in the negative or believe in whatever, there's just this polarization or whatever, the spectrum of what's being. If you believe this, then the other has to be true as well. So I just kept moving with it and just kept doing my due diligence of going for my walk, being out in the sun, giving myself food, like all those things. And eventually you just start to like slowly climb back out. And then you're like looking back going, whew, God, made out of that one.
That was a real doozy. That one sucked.
That was a close call. I would call that a close call of, the possibilities being right to, fall into a trap, really. Yeah.
When we talk about your sister, and you and I talk about your sister a lot when we're together because she's our common, we didn't know each other until she was gone, which is insane. And immediately we were like, I know you. I know you. And not just because she talks about both of us to each other. We're kindred, you and I.
Absolutely. I heard stories about all of her friends, and it was, at the visitation, it was some friends obviously over the years, but at the visitation, it was putting faces to name. When I turned around and saw you, I was like, I know you. Like, it was immediate. It was absolutely 100% just this knowing of like, I know this person. Are you sure we've never met before?
Yeah, when I think of her, she made the most grand exit that she could have made. And when we talk about astrology, I mean, I literally, the fact that she was a couple of weeks that you're saying a couple of weeks before she passed, she was like, "Can I pull up that reading, that chart reading?" And I said this to you, that bitch calculated. She was like triangulating to the minute, and then she ascended during an eclipse. Want to talk about it a little bit?
I've honestly, Jenna, I've done the math, like right down to the days, the numerology of the days and everything. Like, it's just absolutely insane how perfectly timed that was, you know? And honestly, a conscious crystal, there's obviously the multi-dimension, right? And my sister video journaled, as you know, but maybe other people don't. She video journaled regularly for I think over a decade, the last decade of her life. And I'm in possession of all of them. And I've spent some time earlier after she passed watching them. And, one of the more recent ones she did in the last 2 years when she was within like her illness, she was talking and saying, like, I don't always know what's going on. She's like, Crystal here doesn't necessarily understand at times what is happening right now. She's like, but I 100% believe that my guides are taking care of it. They're doing the thing. And I just believe that all is how it should be. And because of that, that's where I sat throughout it as well. And including, the last couple of days, just watching it unfold because I was there for the whole thing. She spent her last 3 weeks in the hospital and watching her. And then in those final days, just seeing it. Some people may not understand what that means, but it was just beautiful to watch how she navigated and never gave up.
She did navigate in the most unbelievable. I mean, anybody who has seen that episode of this podcast will know. We recorded in August and she passed in October. So it was months before she passed. She hadn't yet gone into palliative, but she was close. And the whole way through, she was just like, death happens, babe. And I was like, okay. And we've talked about this too a lot. She did not want to die. She did not believe she was going to die. In fact, I was meant to come and see her on the Wednesday, watch the episode with her, and the world got in the way. And I was not able to say goodbye to her. But in that way, we have lots of conversations about it. We're cool. She said to me on the Wednesday when I couldn't come, she was like, I'm not dying. She cried on Saturday. I was like, yes, you were. What the hell?
Yeah, she honestly just never believed. I said this in my eulogy, if that's what you want to call it, that she never once believed that I'm going to die. She kept saying to me, I remember sitting beside her in the hospital bed and her saying, Lindsay, I believe in miracles. I see these possibilities. There's a possibility that I could die. There's also a possibility that I can learn. And she just kept, I'm going to stay right here. The lane that she was staying in was the lane of neutrality. And she talked about that a lot in the last couple of years of her life, was just really working on having a neutral mindset, like not being affected by the swing, which is really difficult to do.
Yeah, she loved a polarity, your sister.
But it was fascinating to watch and really grounding for me. I honestly felt when we were in the hospital, I just felt like a grounding rod. I just felt like somebody had stuck a piece of copper down my back and through my feet. And I was just like holding the ground and holding her hand and just kept so much. What was interesting about being in the hospital and being like her number one in a way, right? And the person that it was okay for me to be in the room. The only time she asked to leave the room was the night she started to lose consciousness. And it was only for a few minutes. She knew, I think at that time, that something was happening. She was losing control of, although she lost control of tons of things. But being that person, it was like in the hospital, I became the person that was also protecting her from things that she wasn't able to handle as well anymore. And that was energy, right? So other people's energy that to no fault of their own. It's just if they hadn't seen her yet, if they hadn't, been a witness to the progression and then coming, that it was a very emotional. There was a lot of emotion coming from a lot of people. And she just didn't always have the energy to like hold space like she could have before. So I became the person that was like, okay, all right, guys, let's go. Crystal needs a nap. She needs time, she needs space. And many times after people left, it was that she either had a nap or we had like a debrief of what she was feeling, what she needed to let go of, what she needed to say. Like it was in those final weeks that me and her had a lot of big conversations, a lot of hard conversations about stuff.
Yeah. And just existing. And, you've said this many, many times, but you and your sister were not just sisters. You were also incredibly close friends. You were best friends and sisters. And the way in which the two of you understood one another, it often felt like there was a connection between it still is there. I hear you sometimes speak, and a lot of the joy of getting to be your friend is feeling like she's still very much physically here because she's so physically part of you. Some of your mannerisms, the things you say, and just the way that you are in yourself, like she's clearly not far. Yeah, and I know that you're a big believer in kind of spirit setting you up, you and your sister both, her talking about her guides just being the ones who are keeping her on the straight and narrow. They're keeping her in this sort of focused space of don't go to, oh my God, I'm dying, and don't go to, whatever. Like she just was like, nope, this is where I am. And right now where I am is Cancer. And yes, I know that she was a big believer in miracles, but I know that both of you were really, really are believers in, much like myself, that Spirit's got it. Whatever the hell it is that's going on, Spirit's got it. And by the way, I've been guided all along to now. So I'd love if you could chat a little bit more about what that means for you.
Yeah. To now. Yes. I was saying this a little bit earlier, right? Like I had a really hard time, specifically, I'd say, where are we at, 2024? So last like 8 to 10 years of my life have been me like mental health wise, the most difficult. Ever since I was a teenager, I would be in and out. I struggled a lot without any outside help really, except the help I went and got for myself. Specifically the last 10 years, I went into the darkest depression that I've ever been in. Like the most scared I've ever been in my entire life for myself, where I was afraid to be in my own mind. Where before that, I was a big ruminator because of anxiety, just like constantly think and try to replay things, redo things in my head. If I had to have a tough conversation with somebody, I would just constantly just like, and then never actually have a conversation, just have it in my head.
We've had this conversation 30 times, but never once together, just me on my own. And
yeah. But it got to a point where I started having like very serious panic attacks that woke me up at night, and it shifted me into a place that was really challenging to get out of. And like I said, just not trusting my own mind anymore. Like I can't even live in here anymore. I can't go to sleep anymore. I started sleeping with my light on. I've never been like that. I would word searches before bed because I couldn't just sit there and lay there and think because I didn't trust my own thoughts. So I was just like do this until I just couldn't stay awake anymore. And during that period, Crystal came over, and I'm probably going to get emotional right now, but as part of the whole thing, she came over and she stayed with me for days. She fed me, she cleaned my house, she redecorated my house. But one thing she said to me that stuck with me when I was in that really dark place was like, Lynz, this isn't who you are. This is just what it's trying to make you believe, but this isn't you. Like this darkness that you're feeling right now, it's not you. Hearing her say that to me and trying so hard to believe her because immediately I'm like, no, you're wrong. I've always been like this. I've always been this dark. My thoughts have always been this negative. This has always been me. But I never forgot that she said it. And it was like this like lifeline that I was hanging on to of like, okay, my sister believes differently than what I'm feeling. And it took a long time for me to like gain the tools. I got into therapy. I got an amazing therapist. She was just gold.
God bless amazing therapists.
Oh man, when you get a good one, when you get one that, you know what? She was amazing because of her skill and her understanding. She saw what I needed. She saw what the child in me didn't get and needed to work on to build those inner tools that were just not there as a child. We worked a lot on like self-soothing and all that kind of CBT stuff and like reorganizing your thoughts and being kinder to yourself, you know? But eventually I'd say a year and a half, 2 years to really fully come out of it. But this is the crazy part is as I was coming out of it, COVID was hitting and then other crazy stuff started happening. And then it was a year later that Crystal got diagnosed. And it was just like, as Lindsay's getting better, all of a sudden it's like, oh, by the way, your sister's sick. And I remember she was over at my house and she said this in the podcast, actually, with you. She mentioned that she told me to look out for her. And I remember having that conversation with her because she was saying that she was like reading her astrology and it was saying, you know, you're going to go through a really hard time. And I can see her on my couch saying this and she looked so worried. And at that she was reading that, my astrology was saying all the work that you've done is going to prepare you for what's coming next. And never in a million years would I would have believed that Crystal was what was next. Like my belief was me and her are going to be doing this forever together. You know, she's my comrade. She's my, my sombrero, whatever you call it, whatever all the terms are to, you know, say your person in your life that is there with you the whole time. And it was shocking, but also like, these are the twists. These are the part of the movie that you just didn't expect, you know?
It's really interesting, you know, when I think about Gemini and the twins, you know, there is a twin above and a twin below. And Crystal was such a miraculous person. She really was the miracle that she believed in. I believe that wholeheartedly. I've believed that since the day I met her. I was like, I don't know what you are, but you're something special. You're magic. You're something else. And, you know, I think her whole essence and her whole way of being was really focused on none of this is real. Don't get stuck in it. Don't get caught up in it. Don't be too focused on what happens over there or what happens over there. None of these things are real. Everything is make-believe. And what you believe about this world, there's so much more beyond it. There are miracles happening constantly. And she would just live as a miracle. And you and I have talked about this. I think part of her passing in your karmic script is for you to fully embody what it is to be alive. It's like as soon as you started to be like, wait a minute, I don't want to kill myself. I don't want to leave this world. I'm not trying to get out of here. I don't want to escape my body. The universe was like, here's what it actually looks like to do that. The part of you that you don't believe could ever leave is going to leave physically. Can you still want to be here? Can you still be physically in the here and now and know that there is beyond, there are miracles, and that like right now you're just being the below twin so that your above twin can do everything that's necessary on that realm to help you achieve in this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I believe that. Not believe. Believe is such a weird word because it sounds almost like
fairy tales.
Yeah, but it's like embodying. I think embody is more a stronger word. Like I embody that now. I absolutely understand and feel that I am a physical human being that, you know, walks around on this earth and has to feed myself. Like, what is that? Gotchi, Gucci, whatever the heck those kids played with. Feeding your little plant stuff as kids.
Tamagotchi.
I wasn't into it, but other kids were cool. But I got to feed myself. I got to water myself. I've got to like that this vessel can keep, doing its thing. But I also have this understanding that there's all that going on and that I'm 100% connected to. And there's moments where that connection is so strong. It's almost like, I don't want to use the word scary, but just like, whoa, whoa.
It's large. It's universal, right? It's all of time and space big. And that's fucking scary. That right now there are 2 astronauts stuck in space. I don't know if you know this. There are 2 astronauts that are stuck in space right now. Boeing was like, hey, do you mind if we just use some used parts to build this? And NASA was like, sure. And there are 2 space astronauts stuck in space. That shit is scary.
Scary, man. Being in nothingness is scary. I had laser eye surgery. This is it leads into this, but they don't tell you this part of it. So they lay you down, they clamp your eye open so you can't blink, right? And then they cut like a window, but it's just a 3-sided window. Okay. And then they lift that flap up. And when they lift that flap up, you don't see it, so it doesn't matter. It is darkness of nothing. Like I felt like I was in space. Like I felt like this is nothing.
This is my most terrified face. That's terrifying to me.
It was terrifying because there was no light coming in. So, like even when you have your eyes closed, there's light, right?
Yeah.
Even when you're in darkness, there's light somehow. This was like dark, dark. Like it was so dark.
How dark was it?
So dark. But it was wild. I was like, oh my God, this must be what nothingness is, because I couldn't see anything.
But that's kind of cool because it means that you could visit her in that place in your mind.
Yes. Yeah. There's a few different ways I connect to my sister. One, I can just honestly think of her and I feel like she puts her hand on my shoulder and she talks to me and stuff, but definitely through music for her celebration. So the last year I gave her access to my Spotify because she was on Apple Music and I'm like, you need to get on Spotify. So now, because under my account, I have all of her stuff. So to build the music for her celebration, I went through her Spotify and took out all the songs that she liked. And I put them into this massive playlist. So that's what was playing when people walked in, was all of her favorites. Like she literally clicked, like, this is my favorite, this is my favorite, this is my favorite. And it's from different lists that she had built. So I also have her bike, her original bike, which, she biked around Toronto everywhere. She put kilometers on that bike.
Oh yeah. She used to bike all the way up here at Avenue in Eglinton. She'd bike all the way from down at Queen and wherever she was.
And I love biking too. It's one of the things that I've held on to since being kids. And we used to bike when we were kids, right? And so now I have her bike. And that's when I get out on a bike, I put in either her music or my music and I just go. And now I think I bike longer now than I ever have. I'll go for like 40K and just think and connect with her and, get lost in it. And this whole crazy freaking journey that I just went on that, I'm still processing, still trying to not necessarily understand, because I think I really try to let go of, because there's a lot to get caught up in, right? Like there's a lot that, as a human brain, I could like, well, why didn't this happen? Why didn't that? Why didn't we make this choice? Why did she do this? Why? And I think that what I've learned in therapy is just a lost cause, like
those answers aren't going to come.
They're not going to come.
And it doesn't change the circumstances either.
No. And it just, honestly, it ends up hurting me more. And that was my mantra when I was in the hospital. And I said it to her many times because there was moments where, I said this again in my eulogy where she did have regret, but she's human. Like those came up and she wants to live. Like we touched on that. She wants to be alive. She doesn't want this to be the reality of what's happening ultimately. And I remember just I kept saying to her that this just is what it is. And that is okay. Like is what it is. What is right now. And that we don't have any control over anything else except for this moment that we're in.
I love that you touched on music. I know that she has been sort of sending signals. I know she was like sending music to you all along. And I know that is certainly, a communication tool for those who are in spirit to send us messages. I mean, there's lots of different ways that we receive messages, but certainly you are a person who is incredibly open to receiving any kind of message, but certainly music. I mean, you are a DJ, right? That's your profession of 17 years. Am I right about that number? Yeah. So music is clearly a huge part of your life. And we know that if we are just energy, if we are just frequency, then we're just basically music expressing itself in a physical body. I'd love for you to share a little bit about some of the kind of cool synchronicities, because I know she sent you some cool music to just be like, I'm here.
Like, I feel like she was just having conversations with me through music. Like, it would just different at different times. Like, what was one of the ones that came through? It was something about there's been so many, it's hard to keep track. But through Spotify, because I'm a big Spotify listener. Oh, remember the one after it was the day after she passed? That one was crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm having my first like meltdown at like the reality of it was started sinking in. I was with my best friend and I put on the songs because I use music to emote. Like that's one of I like normal people, right? Like we use it to move through emotion. And I'm like, I'm not from with that one. And there was a few songs that were huge for her that we had moments with in her final weeks. So I was playing those. And then after those had finished, this new song came on that I had never heard before. And it was talking about this woman and her life being challenging and having regrets, but she's like moving through and she's on the other side. It was very like to the point where I was like sobbing on the couch, like, and then I'm like, what is this? I sat up and I'm like, I didn't choose this. And then I'm looking through the lyrics and it's just like Crystal's talking. Like she's just saying, like, this is what's happened right now. And my friend is also just completely flabbergasted, like, whoa. And then we look at who's singing it. And I think I told you this story was when Crystal was starting to transition in the hospital.
Transition out of her body.
Out of her body, yes. So she's still like in and out. She can have conversation, but also you can tell she's going on a different plane. The things she's saying don't make sense to what is in the room right now. And the nurse was trying to gauge where she was at. So she had the flashlight and then she was asking her where she was. She asked, Crystal, do you know my name? And she said what her name was. And then I was standing on the other side on the bench. She said, do you know what their name is? And she says, yes, that's Holly. But she didn't even look at me. And I looked at the nurse and the nurse is looking at me and I'm like, and then when the song played, the singer's name was Holly. And I was just like, what magic is happening right now? Like, what is she trying to say to me? So things like that just keep happening over and over again.
What's so fascinating is years and years ago when I was going through my own mental health stuff, I had a psych eval. And one of the things that they asked me, some of those questions in the psych evaluation, this is like I was post-suicide attempt. I was clearly deep in an eating disorder, like not well. My father had been, bipolar my whole life. So there were some red flags. And I was afraid. I was afraid of having a psych eval because I was afraid that they were going to be like, all right, you're as crazy as he is. Into the fucking penitentiary you go. Go, padded walls for you. I was like certain that was going to be the outcome. And so I remembered some of the questions that I thought were like particularly odd or a theme of my life that had come up many, many times and I thought was normal, but it turned out, according to the psych eval, maybe it wasn't. And the one that really fucking struck me was they asked me, do you think that when you listen to music, that they're singing directly to you? And I thought, doesn't everybody think that? Now, almost 2 decades later, I'm like, no. You're creating your reality. The music is the frequencies that we're receiving. We receive the frequency we need to hear. We connect to it in a particular way on purpose. It's good to hear the music as being heard for you and like what you need. Music is healing, no question. And music always finds me exactly when I need it, just as Crystal sends you what you need when you need it, and spirit sends what it needs. But that question plagued me for years because I thought, like, it's just such a true testament to me that we really are backwards. when it comes to mental health and spirituality. Like the two have just been so broken from one another, and it makes me crazy.
100%. Yeah.
I wonder how for you, now that you've kind of gone through this whole deep darkness and you're on the other side and your sister is literally on the other side, how you're navigating your connection to your mental health and what that looks like, and the ups and the downs. You said last week was tricky and that kind of thing. How are you navigating all of that?
A few different ways. One of them is practical. What I learned in therapy that has absolutely stuck with me is taking care of those immediate things that I sometimes, when I get overwhelmed, I tend to neglect. So sometimes I just need a nap. I know now, I tell myself, it's like, if I'm starting to have like darker thoughts or more negativity, I'm like, you know what? I just need some rest. I literally, my brain is overwhelmed. I just need to rest my brain. I know once I get a good sleep, I'm going to wake up 100% refreshed, and everything's going to look different. My reality is going to look different because I've taken the time to repair. It's like understanding this body needs repair. Like it needs to like do its thing to get rid of the debris, right? Of life every day. So that's one of them, getting sleep, eating the food that I know is good for me. So taking the time to prepare something. I make myself a beautiful breakfast. It looks pretty on my plate. I got all my proteins, my greens, all those things. Exercise. I've always loved to be physical and to like move my body. But now there's such a greater understanding for me how that connects to my mental health because of the hormones that are released from it. So like the high that I get when I go for that bike ride, I just feel like just happy. I'm just like, whoa, I'm happy. And I'm happy because not only did I go out and spend time with my sister because I'm on her bike and I'm listening to her music and I'm, connecting in that way and taking that time to keep that connection alive. I'm also happy because I've moved my body and it's created this like, amazing exchange. And now I got dopamine and I'm good, It's understanding that there's all these like temptations out there that I could go get in substances, or I could just build it in myself. And my body, for honestly, already been manufactured to give me all that. I just got to find how it works for me, because what works for me might not work for somebody else. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to I've slowed down a lot. I don't move as fast. The one thing that I really learned being with Crystal through that is as she, progressed in her illness and she wasn't able to do those things that she was able to do before. And it would really upset her.
Yes. It was hard for her to not work out and not move her body and not do some of the normal bodily things as her body started to decay.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as a healthy person, it's hard to put ourselves there to really understand what that means. And it really means it is a challenge for her to get out of bed and go have a shower. It is a challenge for her to get out of bed, go downstairs and make food. I never made Crystal feel less than. It was always like so important to me to like, I didn't want to coddle her. Like she's so independent and needed to feel that independence. So I never pushed things. I never wanted to make her feel like, she was, getting worse. It's like, yes, let's get on a bike. Let's go for a bike ride. Let's do this. Let's walk somewhere. And if she told me that she couldn't, okay, then she couldn't, but I just kept like, she kicked my ass in bowling on her birthday. It was 6 weeks before she passed. And I was like, and she's like, how am I winning? I'm like, I don't know, because I'm actually trying right now. And you were, and then she beat me in all these other games, And so she was still trying so hard. But what I was saying is, as she did start to, get slower and slower, I just slowed down with her. I just kept, if she was walking slow, I would walk slow. If she was talking slow, I would talk slow. If she was chewing slow, I would chew slow. Like I just kept trying to like mirror her. So she didn't feel, as I'm saying that, my feet, I can feel my feet just like grounding in. I didn't ever want her to feel overwhelmed by my presence because I was just doing this. I would just try to really match her energy. And it taught me to slow down, you know?
Yeah. I'm like, I really hear you. You're like embodying this Gemini twin thing. I don't know where it's coming through or coming from. It's coming through something. She's pulling it through. But yeah, all the things that you're saying that have been working for you in your grief to help you through, because you've been navigating like a fucking champ. I mean, the celebration of life that you and your family put together for her was exceptional. Everything in the space. I mean, for those who don't know, Crystal was a purple pink girl. Everything was all purples, all soft lighting. And, she had a way about her, and everything in the space felt like her. But, you've been navigating, from my perspective, obviously not in your life every day, but from my perspective, you've been navigating really, really beautifully. And it's clear that she, as your person, had been guiding you to the embodiment that you needed to be in order to move through this. And I think that her slowing down, she unconsciously knew that you would match her, that you would meet her there and try to keep her comfortable, like make her feel like there's nothing wrong with you. I'm right on your pace. You're not dying, right? If she's trying to stay focused and you're out here going a mile a minute, she's like, I can't do any of that shit, right? But if you're slowing down to match her, then you're just going about life as normal and things are just slowing down a little bit. But it was a tool that you obviously needed to get really into your body and into yourself,
An amazing lesson to learn and embody and to carry that now. It was crazy the day that she passed, the feeling that I had, because I wasn't there. And I left her at noon hour. It was the last time I said goodbye to her. And she passed, I think it was at 3:48 in the afternoon I had to DJ a wedding that day. And when I had set up the speakers, this is the story that you're remembering, the first download that I was getting of music. I set up the speakers, and you can imagine what's going on inside me, because the last thing I said to her was, whatever will be, will be. If I'm meant to be here with you, I will be here. But we both know that I have to go do this right now. Like she told me on the Wednesday, Lindsay, go do this gig. It's the only event that I could not assign DJ to. So I set up my speakers, and all of a sudden I can smell her. So that's another way that I get like things. I can smell her. And this has happened a lot in my past, different, with different people or whatever.
Clairsalience, it's real.
And boom, it was like she was standing beside me, and I'm like, whoa. And I went back to my DJ setup, and instantly I put on Karma Chameleon, which is never a song I've ever used to test my speakers in my entire career. But it is a core memory of mine of her and our younger sister Amber. When we were little, we used to have baths together. We were singing that song in the bathtub, Karma Chameleon by Culture Club or whatever. And I just danced. I just smiled, and I was in this place of joy, and I was just like dancing. And then after that, I went outside, and one of my DJs had called me, and I was telling him, this is what we're in right now. Like, I don't know if what's happening. I had to be here. I had to leave her. And as I'm talking to him, like I can feel from like my knees down, I'm just being pulled. Like I feel like I'm like, like those like boots. I just like felt so connected, like grounded, like somebody was just like holding me down. And it was within that like half an hour that she was, taking her final breaths. And then all of a sudden, I'm literally getting ready. This bride is about to walk down the aisle, and my brother phones me, and he's like, Lynz, what's going on? And right away I knew, because I told everybody at the hospital, like, whatever's going to be was going to be. I was planning on going back to the hospital that night after I was finished. So I told them not to call me, which I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad one, but it doesn't matter. Because my brother did. Because my brother didn't know. And he was driving, and he saw the eclipse while he was driving back to the hospital. He said it was the most miraculous thing he's ever seen in his life.
It was a miraculous eclipse. It was. And yeah, she was a miracle. She really, really was. I love to talk about her, and I love to spend time with you because it feels like I get to be with her. I say that a lot. Every time we see each other, I'm always like, she's right here. Sometimes I forget, but it's easy to remember when I'm in your presence. I wonder, for your own journey as you continue on this path of inner exploration, but also of, moving through the grief of living without her and just kind of watching the world unfold as it is. What is it that you think the world needs to know about moving forward the way that you have with such grace?
Staying present to it, like just not hiding from it. I think it's harder when we push, right? It's so much against all momentum to push things away. A friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, uses the term lean in. And I think that's what I did through this whole experience and continue to do in my own way, whatever that looks like at any point in time, is I just kept leaning in, and I keep leaning in to the grief, to the feelings of the reality of not having her here anymore, and moments like now when it's like I'm saying it out loud to another person, I feel it in a different way. It's such a loss, but that's life. And I think it sounds so simple and maybe so ridiculous to some people, but it's just life, and we just don't have any control over that. We can't control death. We can't control illness. There's so much that is just beyond our capacity to control. So it becomes a point of accepting, and just accepting that this is life, and this is what we are in, and this is what we are living. And our realities will be based on our ability to accept.
Yeah, I think that's true of everything. I think not just grief. I think just like looking at the world for what it is, it's hard to know exactly what it is. Things are very complex and diluted and convoluted and whatever, but allowing when you feel a feeling, when you notice that you're in sadness or grief or anger or frustration or whatever or joy and pleasure and whatever, to like let yourself be in the feeling of it and be present to it instead of trying to brush it aside, deny it, put it under the rug, transform it into something a little bit more palatable. Like none of that shit actually works. Eventually the bitterness will hit you, and it'll hit you in massive waves. So better to be with it as you're moving through it. Are there any other nuggets that you want to share with our listeners? And, one of the things that I always ask my guests when they come on my show is, how, first of all, where can people find you, and how can they support you in your business?
Oh my God. I don't know where you can find me because I don't know where I am.
Somewhere in the physical plane for sure. You're here for sure.
That's it. I think you'd have to find me physically, like on a bike or something, right around the Oshawa there. You'll find me. Yeah, I don't spend too much time on the interwebs. I'm not on there. Like I'm at DJ_LYNZ. DJ Lynz and Co. is my business. But honestly, when I say I'm a liver of this experience, that's really what I do. I spend a lot of time like in the physical, just trying to connect to the physical and connect with people I love, people that I find interesting, and that I feel a connection with. So I'm very much in that in the real time. Find me in real time.
Get off your computers, close your phones, leave the screen.
I'm on it just like everybody else, but I don't always show my face. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I get that. I think that for me is an important part of my own mental health practice, is just putting the thing away and being real for a little while in reality is like an important tool. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for doing this with me. It's really, really special, almost a year later in our recording. I mean, following your sister's episode was paralyzed to record. I had a bunch of episodes that are now out in the world that sat for a year because I couldn't put myself into the headspace. And I didn't want to, funnily enough, this is the word that's coming through, I did not want to eclipse her episode. I didn't want to put it lower down on the playlist because she was gone. And I'm grateful that you're here and we get to bump her up to the top again in your name, because you're just embodying her essence and your essence all in one, and you're radiating her, which is just so special for me. So this has been really, really, really special. And just thank you so much for being you, for joining me today. And thank you to all of our listeners. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of I'm Really Into That Stuff. We'll be back in another couple of weeks with a new episode for you. Take good care of yourselves, everybody. Thanks for listening to another episode of I'm Really Into That Stuff. You can follow along with us on Instagram at I'm Really Into That Stuff, or on Twitter at That Stuff Pod. And be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. If this episode resonated with you and something that you're really into, share it with someone you love. Sending you strength, peace, love, and light until our next episode.